the python hunting. I think in Florida now, anyone can hunt a python, and you get a prize too. Like you get money.
Florida is a land defined by the wild, but one serpent has silenced its soul. The Burmese python invasion has turned the Everglades into an ecological graveyard.
Another part of the problem was that there was a wildlife research facility where they were studying pythons.
Desperate for answers, some claimed a secret release of ferocious honey badgers. When evidence appeared in the swamps, everyone began to wonder, maybe it wasn't just a rumor. The heart of the crisis and the radical proposal. Florida is famous for its wild headlines, but the most terrifying story wasn't a military assault or a sudden disaster. It was a slow, creeping invasion that started in the 1970s. Americans, wanting unique pets, brought in the Burmese python, a beautiful, massive snake native to Southeast Asia. These snakes were never meant for our swamps. As the pets grew from manageable hatchlings into 18-foot giants, owners often became overwhelmed, realizing they had a monster on their hands. Some simply opened the door, releasing them into the lush, warm waterways of South Florida. Then came Hurricane Andrew in 1992. This catastrophic storm ripped through reptile breeding facilities, shattering cages and scattering hundreds, maybe thousands of pythons directly into the Everglades National Park. The snakes found paradise. There were warm temperatures, dense cover, and an endless buffet of naive native animals that had never evolved to face such a predator. The explosion didn't happen all at once, but it caused a lot of damage. Over the next 3 decades, the pythons became an apex predator with no natural checks, turning the Everglades, one of North America's most biologically diverse wetlands, into what scientists now call an ecological desert. The evidence is brutal and undeniable. Reports from the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, show the catastrophic impact. In areas where pythons dominate, populations of small and medium-sized mammals have nearly vanished. We are talking about a 99% decline in raccoons, opossums, and marsh rabbits are virtually gone. The ecosystem is being dismantled from the bottom up. Alligators, once the kings of the swamp, now compete with the pythons and sometimes end up as their dinner. The state of Florida couldn't just stand by. Millions of dollars and years of effort went into attempts to contain the serpent nightmare. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, FWC, initiated major programs. They organized the famous Python Challenge, paying bounty hunters to track and capture the reptiles. Scientists developed high-tech solutions like implanting GPS transmitters into Judas snakes to lead hunters to breeding females, and they used environmental DNA, eDNA, to track the snakes through water samples. These programs caught thousands of pythons, but it wasn't enough. For every massive female they hauled out, dozens more were out there breeding. After all the money, the technology, and all the manpower, the experts still felt uncertain. They openly admitted their efforts weren't going to get rid of the pythons and were only slowing them down. The python problem stopped being just a scientific challenge and became a psychological crisis. The public, frustrated and tired of the endless bad news, started aiming for extreme solutions. They wanted a miracle, a quick, almost absurd answer to a problem that felt too big for humanity to solve. This hunger for a radical fix was all over public forums and social media, with people throwing out every reckless idea imaginable. This desperation and need for a hero didn't just stay online. According to a pervasive and deeply unsettling conspiracy theory that circulated among political and financial circles, the crisis fueled a proposal so extreme it couldn't be whispered in government halls. It moved the conversation away from regulated science and into a less visible world of personal matters and unchecked influence. The official science offered no hope. When the government failed, The question became, who had the resources and the arrogance to take nature into their own hands? We traced the rumor back to its alleged source, a mysterious biotech organization operating completely off the grid. The whole concept of fighting one problem with another animal, called biological control, has a terrible track record. History is littered with examples of these plans backfiring spectacularly. Take the cane toad in Australia. It was brought in back in the 1930s to eat crop beetles, but instead of focusing on the bugs, the toads ignored them. They just ate everything else and poisoned native predators that tried to eat them, making the problem 10 times worse. Hawaii had a similar disaster with the mongoose, imported to hunt rats, which instead decided to eat the native birds' eggs. So, when the idea of introducing the honey badger started to surface in Florida, a creature famous for fighting lions and being resistant to snake venom, scientists immediately shut it down as pure fantasy. But money, as we know, often ignores facts. This is where the conspiracy theory begins. Whispers online claimed that the solution came not from the government, but from a privately funded group called Everglades Resilience Labs, or ERL. This alleged lab, backed by wealthy investors with millions sunk into South Florida land, supposedly decided to create their own solution, believing they could fix nature better than nature could. The rumor went further, adding a modern twist that the ERL wasn't just releasing wild honey badgers. They were allegedly releasing genetically modified, or GM, honey badgers. The theory was that these animals were bioengineered for two key things: hyperaggression, to guarantee they went after the pythons, and a self-limiting lifespan, a genetic kill switch that would cause the population to decline after a few years. It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie, a monster designed to save the day but with a safety shut off. This was the unethical hope, a temporary, targeted weapon to clean up the swamp before turning on itself. This is the entire premise of the internet rumor, the one that turned a silly online joke into a terrifying investigation. The actual scientific community, however, was appalled by even the idea of introducing any kind of honey badger. They warned that the Everglades is a fragile wetland, not the African savanna. The badgers are famously resourceful, digging up anything edible. Dr. Frank Mazzotti, a wildlife biologist at the University of Florida, was quoted as calling the concept ecologically suicidal. He accurately pointed out that an invasive predator, even one modified, wouldn't discriminate. The badgers would just as likely eat the eggs of endangered sea turtles and native birds as they would the pythons, causing two ecological crises instead of one. Everyone agreed strongly. No matter what a private lab said they could do with genetics, releasing a honey badger in Florida would break all conservation rules and cause disaster. Science clearly said, never. The moment the rumor surfaced, every wildlife expert reacted the same way, fast and unified. They weren't worried about badgers battling pythons. They feared what the badgers would do to the Everglades itself. Before the conspiracy could take hold, scientists stepped in to reveal the animal's true nature and expose the fatal flaw behind this so-called fearless plan. The fatal flaws in the plan and the denial. Everyone knows the honey badger from those amazing viral videos, a fearless ball of fury fighting huge snakes and somehow shrugging it off. It's the stuff of legend, but that's the myth. The scientific reality of the honey badger is completely different, and it's why every single conservationist on the planet was screaming no when the idea of bringing them to Florida came up. The honey badger is not a snake specialist, but an opportunistic omnivore. It lives mostly in the dry, open deserts and scrublands of Africa and the Middle East, environments that are nothing like the dense, humid Everglades. They eat insects, berries, rodents, and snakes. But snakes are actually a very small fraction of their normal diet. That famous venom resistance? It's not magic immunity, it's an adaptation. They can still be bitten and get very sick, sometimes passing out for a few hours. When they wake up, they finish the job, which looks incredible on camera, but it has its limits. The Florida environment alone would make them a terrible choice. They're small and slow in water. They'd be facing Burmese pythons that can be 18 feet long and weigh over 200 pounds, a snake far bigger than their typical African prey. The whole idea is based on a few seconds of thrilling video footage and not years of sound biology. But here is the most important reason why introducing the honey badger would have been a catastrophic mistake. It wouldn't hunt pythons. It would hunt everything else. The Everglades is a fragile nursery for species already struggling to survive. A honey badger is an expert burrower and digger. It would instantly become an ecological nightmare, destroying the recovery efforts for native animals. It would tear apart the nests of endangered sea turtles and ground-nesting birds, and it would devour the few remaining populations of native small mammals like raccoons and rabbits that the pythons haven't finished off. One wildlife biologist was quoted as saying, "The concept was simply beyond the edge of madness." Introducing a honey badger wouldn't fix the python problem. It would create an immediate second, equally destructive invasive species. Then there is the issue of control. Honey badgers are notoriously intelligent, and they are escape artists. Zookeepers around the world will tell you they can solve complicated puzzles, undo latches, and tunnel under concrete barriers. Releasing them into a wetland that spans thousands of square miles isn't a solution, but a guaranteed, irreversible mistake. Once they're out forever, capable of surviving anywhere from the remote swamps to suburban backyards. For conservationists, the science was clear. The cure was guaranteed to be worse than the disease. Science had delivered its final verdict. Any release was guaranteed to cause a disaster. But a crisis doesn't wait for authorization. While the government relied on its official policy to dismiss the rumor, its own routine actions, specifically the temporary closure of remote access zones, were about to be misinterpreted by a desperate public as proof that a secret operation was already underway. The scientific community's condemnation of the honey badger idea was immediate. Experts were clear. Introducing another non-native predator would be beyond the edge of madness. Florida's official policy, born from the existing ecological nightmare, is always against introducing new species without careful risk analysis. This fact is the state government's only response to the honey badger idea, a clear and automatic refusal to ever approve this disastrous action. However, for a public longing for a miracle, but the rules wouldn't allow it, that silence left an empty space, and in that space came the rumor that a secret, illegal release had really happened. The public's suspicion grew rapidly, focusing on the lack of a specific, pointed denial. People were ready to believe that the state was complicit, using the established policy as a technical escape clause to protect powerful, anonymous figures who had allegedly funded the unauthorized operation. The core issue wasn't what the FWC said, but what the public chose to believe in the face of decades of government failure. This suspicion was turbocharged by a single verifiable event in the swamp. The FWC announced temporary closures of several remote, restricted access points in the deep southern Everglades. Officially, these closures were routine, citing unspecified habitat management operations and increased patrol activity. But for the online communities and local hunters already convinced a secret project was underway, this was the final piece of circumstantial evidence. The restricted zones were exactly where the largest python populations congregated, and the rumor spread rapidly that the government wasn't managing habitat at all. Instead, they were secretly cleaning up the physical evidence or sending in teams to try and recapture the highly dangerous, illegally introduced animals before the full scandal broke. The honey badger, whether real or not, had already transitioned into folklore. The idea that someone, somewhere, had finally taken the drastic, terrifying step to solve the python crisis provided a powerful narrative that the public desperately wanted to be true. The government's steady, factual adherence to policy and their logistical closures were viewed not as responsible action, but as undeniable proof that a secret, high-stakes game was being played behind the official curtain. Whispers and official denials were everywhere, yet the story remained just a theory based on speculation. Rumors are easy to ignore until the surroundings themselves start showing signs. Before long, the swamp began revealing unsettling, concrete evidence that even scientists found hard to completely dismiss. Evidence from the swamp and the fact. A rumor is just noise, but in a crisis, people look for proof everywhere. Despite the FWC's firm denials, the desperation in Florida led people to misinterpret real events in the environment. Python hunters were the first to report something strange. These veterans, who spend every day tracking the invasive snakes, were finding large python carcasses that had been ripped open, but not in a way that immediately fit a typical alligator attack. The wounds were simply unexplained anomalies. Local speculation immediately attached these unique, strange markings to the rumored predators, claiming the secretive operation was underway. The factual reality remained. These were unexplained predation marks, quickly absorbed into the developing folklore. Beyond the dead snakes, hunters also reported strange physical signs that defied a quick explanation. They found claw marks dug into the muddy embankments and burrow holes that were inconsistent with common local fauna. Experts couldn't confirm they belonged to a honey badger, nor could they rule out large, powerful digging mammals like bears or feral hogs. These circumstantial clues were enough to convince many locals that the secret operation was real. They believed the government was lying, and the confusing evidence was simply being ignored right there in the Everglades. This disconnect between the scientific denial and the frustration on the ground created a crisis of trust. Then came the data anomaly that truly fueled the fire of the conspiracy. In the same general area as the restricted zones, the number of successful python captures dropped sharply and unexpectedly. This temporary dip in the python population was factual, a measurable event. Scientists were quick to offer logical, factual explanations. This was likely the result of increased targeted hunting success, or perhaps a short-term weather effect that caused pythons to temporarily migrate. But the conspiracy theory offered a simpler, more exciting answer. This was the short-term success of the secret predator. The badgers had swept through and cleared the immediate area, a claim the conspiracy theorists immediately used to validate the desperate act. Further fueling the unsettling feeling were the unverified claims from local residents and drone pilots. There were reports of fast-moving black and white shapes seen at dusk and deep, guttural growls that echoed through the mangroves, sounds that simply didn't match native wildlife. These subjective accounts instantly became part of the local folklore, reinforcing the dangerous idea that something new and terrible was loose. For the frustrated public, the anomalies were undeniable, but their interpretation was tragically wrong. The mystery had now doubled. The anomalies in the swamp were too strange to ignore, yet the official record was completely clean. The public had the alleged result, dead pythons and strange tracks. But to truly understand the danger, the investigation must now find the final crucial facts that explain why this dangerous idea became so irresistible. While the internet was busy fictionalizing the crisis with honey badgers, the real-world fight was being ignored. The real victims of the python crisis are the native Florida wildlife. The raccoons, the marsh rabbits, the opossums, their numbers are still down by 99% in core areas. The focus should be on supporting the FWC's difficult, dangerous, and often unrewarding work of python removal, not distracting them with manufactured myths. The anomalies in the swamp, the strange track, the ripped carcasses, and the dip in capture rate all felt like proof to the desperate public. But when scientists finally offered their factual counter-narrative, the elaborate rumor began to crumble. Experts explained that the temporary dip in python captures was not the result of a secret killer, but a phenomenon with several mundane ecological explanations. Python detection naturally fluctuates with weather and season. The snakes simply became harder to catch. The reality behind those unexplained carcasses shows native bobcats and panthers have been observed learning to hunt the younger pythons. This is the gradual miracle of nature, an ecosystem adapting to protect itself. The Everglades is still a land of secret, and the pythons are still there. The fight continues, but the first battle we must win is the one for the truth. This story, the one about the fearless, imported monster saving the Everglades, never happened, but millions believed it. The shock isn't that a creature like the honey badger could exist. The shock is how quickly and completely a lie, wrapped in the packaging of a documentary, can capture the American imagination and become a consensus truth. This is highlighted by the tragic irony called the raccoon paradox. If the pythons really did wipe out the native mammals like raccoons and opossums, the pythons would eventually starve or move away, causing a natural temporary decline. If the honey badger were present, it would simply prey on the few recovering native animals. It's a no-win situation. Throughout all this, the FWC and USGS stand firm in their statement. No permits were requested, no releases of honey badgers were authorized, and the whole story is a fabrication. This myth persists because the state of the Everglades today is the new normal. The pythons are still there. The system is permanently altered. Experts are clear. Whatever balance the ecosystem eventually finds will never look the same again. The crisis is a generational wound, and in that wound, the honey badger rumor found fertile ground. We started this journey to uncover a monster in the swamp. We ended it by finding a monster in the modern information age. The honey badger is a ghost born from our own digital desperation, a perfect example of how easily fiction can displace fact when the truth is complicated and disappointing. Do you believe the experiment happened, or is this just the ultimate Florida story? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this story as fascinating as we did, click on the next video on your screen. And don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries.